My name is Frances, and I am a trusted senior travel advisor at Travel Group. And I would like to introduce you to Phillip Solomon and Roshan. I'm not going to try your last name, Roshan. I haven't gotten it correct, and I know I'll make a mistake, so I'll leave it to you. But super excited to have all of you join us. We are live on Facebook. If you don't want to be broadcast on Facebook, you can hide your camera. But Phillip and Sean and I are going to leave our cameras on. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about Stewart Travel Group for those who don't know us, and a little bit about Tourcan Vacations, and then we're going to get started. So Stewart Travel Group is a small boutique travel agency. We're full service, and we specialize in hosted group tours. We've been in business for 10 years this September, but together we've got about 12 travel agents in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI. And we do everything from river cruises to exotic destinations, your trips south, but we specialize in hosted groups, and we do 6 to 10 of those a year. And one of the hosted trips, tours that we're going to do in 2024 is our Sensational South Africa and Victoria Falls tour, and that is in September. So I've invited Phillip and Roshan from Tourcan Vacations to join us, and Tourcan Vacations will be the tour operator for this amazing experience. So Tourcan Vacations is a Canadian company. They've been around for 36 years, based out of Toronto. And I've worked with them on a number of programs. Roshan has been absolutely instrumental in creating life-changing experiences for some of my clients. And I'm really, really pleased to be able to work with them on this tour because I know we're in such good hands. So I'm going to turn it over to Phillip and let him tell us all about the program. And then at the end, I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you all about how it's going to work with Stewart Travel Group and a little bit about the pricing and that kind of thing. So Phillip, over to you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for that lovely introduction. Appreciate that. And also a shout out to my colleague, Roshan, who's joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, Roshan and Francis are the two that worked intensely on the itinerary that is being presented this evening. I'm just the one that's doing the presentation. But just as a matter of interest, Francis has already mentioned about Tourcan Vacations. So we're a tour operator. We're kind of in the background. We have been around for a long time, 36 going into our 37th year, and we work very closely with companies and travel companies such as the Stewart Travel Group, particularly in customizing tours, but not only for individuals, but for groups as well. And that is what we're going to be talking about this evening, is the group tour to South Africa. So really, our specialty is in tailor-making vacations to suit the needs of all travelers and for people who travel in groups as well. So as you can hear from my accent, I'm not originally from these parts. As you can hear, it's a very, very heavy accent, and you can tell, right? I was born and raised in Texas, so that kind of gives you an idea. No, so I was born and raised in South Africa, and my colleague Roshan also comes from the African continent, from Uganda, but has traveled extensively through South Africa. So we're going to talk a little bit this evening about South Africa, this group tour, which includes a visit to Victoria Falls, which is going to run from the 25th of September to early October. So South Africa, located way down on the African continent, as you can see right down on the map that I've presented here. So what I want to do this evening, before we actually get into the itinerary, is talk to you about things that you may want to know prior to travel, questions that you may have already prepared for this evening, and hopefully I'm going to be able to cover them. And one of the questions, of course, relates to how do we get to South Africa? So just as a matter of interest, again, for you, flying from Canada to South Africa, mostly you have to go through Europe, but now there are also flights via the US into South Africa. So it's usually about 6 to 7 hours into a spot in Europe, and I use KLM as an example, and then 11 to 11 and a half hours down to South Africa, obviously a non-stop. The good thing about using some of the airlines like KLM and others, Air France, British Airways, whatever it may be, they fly into Cape Town and also out of Johannesburg. And Stewart Travel, Francis, you'll be able to assist with the air arrangements, right?
Absolutely, I can. Thank you. Yeah, once we have you booked, we will be able to help you with international flights. We'll have flights that the hosts that Calvin and I will be on. You can join us for those, or certainly if you want to make a stopover, stay before or after, we can help you with that. So we can customize your flights, and we'll be working with TourCan to help us do that.
Excellent. Thank you. So we know how we're going to get there. What about travel documents? Now, the nice thing about going to South Africa is you do not require a visa as a Canadian citizen to enter South Africa. However, you are going to the Victoria Falls, so you do need a visa, but this is easy. You obtain it on arrival, payment, US $75, and you must have the exact amount available in cash because they will not have change. So $75 US, and they will stamp your passport, and that will be your entry visa into the country. What else is very important is that your passport must be valid for at least 6 months after your return, and this is there whether you travel to South Africa or to any destination. That's very important when it comes to passports. And also, you need to have at least 2 blank pages side by side in your passport, and this is for immigration purposes in South Africa, and that is what they request. So please take note of those, and again, easy, no visa required. And in terms of health requirements, ladies and gentlemen, we're not doctors, we're not permitted to give out health information, but we can certainly give you advice. At least 6 to 8 weeks prior to departure, contact your doctor or your health clinic to determine if any inoculations are required. The one thing we can tell you is that you will need malaria protection. This is for the safari area when you go into Victoria Falls. But let me say this, that there's no epidemic and people aren't dropping down in the street. It is really precautionary. But also what's important here is you traveling late September into October, and that is not the rainy season. They're just coming out of their dry season. So really, the mosquitoes at that time of the year is much less than what you would have in December, January, February, and March. But it is recommended that you get malaria protection. So please check that out with your doctor or your health clinic. So talking about the weather, what's it going to be like? Sometimes these days, I'm afraid to actually say anything about the weather with all the changes that are taking place. One never knows what to expect. But here are some average temperatures for you. So again, you're traveling towards the end of September, which is springtime in South Africa. Fabulous, comfortable temperatures to travel, as you can see. But just bear in mind, these are average temperatures. Cape Town 18, Johannesburg 24, and going up to the Safari and Victoria Falls, it could be anything from 27 to 30, 31 degrees, already getting much warmer there. But do take note of the average lows. We're still coming out of the cooler season there. So when you do your packing, you're going to need something warm, not only for these temperatures, but also when you go on safari, early morning and late evening, you're going to need something warm, a little jacket to take with you. So this is the spring months. Good time to travel. It's a comfortable time to travel. The other question we often ask is, what is the currency, the money currency in South Africa? It's called the South African Rand, the R sign for Rand. And I can tell you this, the Canadian dollar is very, very strong against the South African Rand. In Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe, you will need US dollars, but for the most part, credit cards are easily and readily used throughout the country, both in Vic Falls and also throughout South Africa. So when we talk about money, and I tell you that the currency is very strong, I just want to give you a sense of a five-star restaurant. This is a high-quality restaurant in Cape Town, South Africa, that we often send folks to, Bahia. And I want to give you an idea of the costs when it's converted from South African rand to Canadian dollars. So when you look at the bottle of wine and you see $10 to $14, you're thinking to yourself, hell, that must be really a cheaper wine for $10 or $14. But in South African rand, that's about 200 rand, 140 close to 180 rand, and that is a good quality of wine. And the same would apply also to the food. So you can actually see over here, 2-course with wine, $30 to $40, and again, you're talking of a very good restaurant. So it gives you a sense of how far your dollar will go in South Africa. In terms of the other currency, the power, you need to take an adapter, because in South Africa, mostly they use this 3-prong plug. You can see on the right-hand side, the type M, and they also do the 2-prong plug, the type C. So you're going to need an adapter for that, as well as for Zimbabwe, where they use type D and type G. So get yourself a multifaceted adapter and take that with you. Another question you may have is, how do we get around? Well, that just depends on the size of the group. So it could be anything from a 15, 17-seater to a 22, 28-seater coach. And these are luxury vehicles, as you can see, very comfortable, big windows. Again, it will depend on the size of the group. So that's some information for you, general information that you need to know prior to traveling to South Africa. So let's talk a little bit about this wonderful itinerary that Francis and Roshan have put together for you. It's going to start off in the beautiful city of Cape Town. You're going to be spending 4 nights there, and I do want to compliment you on that because so many itineraries out there you will see sometimes have 2 nights and 3 nights in Cape Town. It's way too few. Because there's so much to do in the city itself. And the other thing is, when you sometimes compare this with other groups, as many of the activities in Cape Town are offered as optionals, whereas here, what I'm going to tell you is all included. So the beautiful city of Cape Town, located right down on the peninsula at the southwestern end of the African continent. Your accommodation is at the beautiful Portswood Hotel. This is a 4-star property, and it's located in the Victoria and Alfred waterfront, has a kind of a naval theme to it. Very close to restaurants, banks, entertainment, and this is the area where the hotel is located, as you see in the front of your screen. This is called the Victoria and Alfred waterfront, which used to be the harbor in South Africa, which many, many years ago, they started rebuilding, restructuring. They kept many of the old buildings and the facades and created hotels, restaurants, entertainment. It's safe to walk about. There are banks, there are ATMs where you can go and draw local currency. Because talking about the currency, I forgot to mention, you can only use South African rand in South Africa itself. Beautiful view there of the Table Mountain, one of the first places that you will get to visit. So sightseeing included in this tour is a tour of the city of Cape Town, as well as going up beautiful Table Mountain. So this funicular that takes you up, the floor actually turns so that as you go up, you get a 360-degree as you make your way to the top of Table Mountain for spectacular views of the city, the peninsula, and here in the distance you can see Robben Island, and that's where Nelson Mandela, he was incarcerated there for about 19 of his 27 years. So you'll have a guide with you, and the guide will give you some history, but also interesting history about the mountain and the fact that it's home to about 1,500 different plant species. So beautiful views from the top of Table Mountain, and then we're going to take you on a tour through the city. And this is going to be your introduction to South Africa and the history of South Africa. So going way back to the 1600s when the Dutch occupied South Africa, and then in the 1800s when the British came in. And they left many influences throughout South Africa, and you're going to see that in the architecture as you travel through the city. What you see here is very typical Cape Dutch style architecture. You're not only going to see it here, but when you go out to the winelands as well, the British influence, Victorian style architecture, Edwardian style. You can see the beautiful Cape Town City Hall, where the Cape Town Symphony, that's where they perform, going way back to 1905. I'm not going to go into the history because we will be sitting here for 2 hours and I don't have that amount of time, but this is your introduction to Cape Town and South Africa. Now, located just above the core of the city is an area known as the Malay Quarter. So in the 1800s, the Malays were brought to South Africa as slaves and workers, and they established themselves above the city, and they've identified themselves by having their homes painted in these beautiful, bright colors. And we're going to do a little drive through this area. And again, you will learn about their history and the impact that they have had on South Africa and South Africa's move to democracy. Also included is a visit to Robben Island, which I pointed out to you from the top of Table Mountain. And we know that this is where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for about 19 years. And we're going to take you across to Robben Island. It's a quick little 20-minute ferry ride across. And here you're going to learn all about the history of the island, as well as all its flora and fauna. Now, folks, up until pretty recently, many of the tours that were conducted on Robben Island were conducted by ex-political prisoners. Unfortunately, now they've also reached an age, and many of them have passed away, and they've few of them that are still able to do so, but there will be guides on the island to take you around and show you the conditions that these people had to work under and where they lived, the maximum security prison, and also the cell where Nelson Mandela spent the 19-odd years that he was imprisoned on the island. Another tour that's been included is one that we call the Tour of the Cape Peninsula. So we have Cape Town. If you look at the map, you can see at the top in the north, and then we have this peninsula that runs all the way around. And we're going to do a tour that's going to take us along the Atlantic seaboard, back along the Indian Ocean, and back to Cape Town. So this is a full day outing and very, very scenic. We're going to take you along the suburbs of Cape Town, along the Atlantic seaboard, as you can see here. We're going to visit a little town that you'll see there called Hout Bay. Hout Bay is a little fishing village. There's a very endemic fish that you get in this area. It's called the snook, S-N-O-E-K. And maybe you'll get the opportunity to try some beautiful snook pate when you're in South Africa. And we're going to make our way to Cape Point. Now, Cape Point, by tradition, they say, is where the Atlantic and the Indian Oceans meet. I say it must be a fact because they've actually got a white line there to separate the two oceans. But indeed, it is true. This is on the one side, the Atlantic Ocean, and on the other, the Indian, and the difference in temperature is huge. Swimming in the Atlantic Ocean in the Cape Town area is freezing. It's almost unbearable. But when you cross over and go to the Indian Ocean side, it's much more comfortable to go swimming there. So we're going to stop here, spend some time, do a walkabout. And I just want to point out, mistakenly, people think this is the most southern point on the African continent. It's not. It's the most southwestern point on the African continent. The most southern point is a bit further to the east, not as pretty. I shouldn't really say that, but this is really the scenic area and where the two oceans meet. After spending some time there, we're going to cross over to the town of Simonstown. Now, Simonstown is the naval city where the Navy is based in South Africa. But even more importantly, I guess, is the fact that this is where you're going to find this beautiful penguin colony of the African penguin. So going back, I think, to the 1980s, 70s and 80s, this used to be a public beach until a penguin couple actually arrived here, found safe haven, started breeding, and the local government said, hang on a sec, we now have to create a protected area for the penguins. And of course, there were originally about 150,000 to tens of thousands of them, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 penguins now. And this is now a protected area. And the only way you can get to see the penguins is by these walkways. So kudos to the local government for making this a protected area. We're going to take you down to meet these incredible little mammals, birds, and you'll be able to spend some time there and meet the African penguin. They used to be called jackass penguins, but they changed that name. And I just want to mention to you, just by the way, I happened to be there in September of 22, and these are some of the shots that I took there, so you will get to see some penguins. I'm not sure if any of you ever saw on Netflix, there was a program called Penguin Town. I'm not sure if it's still on Netflix, but whether it is or isn't, you can check it out. And Penguin Town is all about the story of the penguins in Simonstown and how they have adapted to that area, but more significantly, how the locals have adapted and accepted these penguins in their environment and even in their homes. And I'm not going to tell you much more. So check it out, Penguin Town on Netflix, and it'll be your introduction to your visit to that area in South Africa. A great way to end the day tour is a visit to the Kirstenbosch Botanical Gardens. That's where we're going to end our tour for that particular day. Lovely to walk around. You're going to learn all about the flora of South Africa, different plant species, bird species, some that most of which are endemic to South Africa. One that is called a fynbos, as you can see over here, and roughly translated, it means a fine bush, and you will only find it in this southwestern part of the country. And this is what fynbos is all about, fine bush, and a variety of other plant species that you will get to see there, and birding as well. Great way to end a full day tour. Something else has been included. You cannot go to South Africa and not get to taste the wine. It's renowned throughout the world, the wine production in South Africa, and we're going to do a day trip to the winelands. So if you look at the map, you can see Cape Town, which I'm highlighting here, and Stellenbosch and Franschhoek. It's only about an hour's drive outside of Cape Town, and we're going to do a full day tour out into that region. We'll get to visit these towns, the Cape Winelands. Over and above the fact that it's very scenic, you're also going to be able to get to do some wine tasting at some of the wine estates and visit the towns. Both towns, Franschhoek and Stellenbosch, very, very rich in Cape Dutch style architecture, because when the Dutch came in, they moved out into this area with their knowledge of winemaking, some of them, and established themselves here. But also the French Huguenots who came in the 1700s, leaving France, and came and settled in this area and brought with them their knowledge of winemaking. So they played a significant role in the wine industry in South Africa and the creation thereof. And we'll also get to visit the memorial, which you see here, dedicated to the French Huguenots. Stellenbosch is the core, the center of the wine industry. You can see all the wine estates surrounding Stellenbosch, rich in Cape Dutch architecture. We'll get to visit the wine estates and also do some wine tasting and see these beautiful Cape Dutch style architectures going way back to the early 1800s. So another full day tour outing, beautiful wines, beautiful tasting, back to Cape Town overnight, 4 nights in the beautiful city. And then we are going to get on board our flight and go off on safari. So we're going to fly up to the Kruger National Park area. So flying time from Cape Town up into this region, it's about just over 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So the distance is not that great. It's not a very long flight. And when we get there, you'll be met at the airport and taken in your game viewing vehicles off to your game lodge, where you're going to spend the next 3 nights. And this is also what separates this itinerary from so many others. Many other itineraries you see out there have game lodges or game hotels and lodges located outside of the park area, and you have to drive in, and usually spend 2 nights. 3 nights is fantastic. I'm glad you've done that to spend at this beautiful place called Kapama River Lodge. So Kapama River Lodge is a private game lodge on its own concession bordering the Kruger National Park. But there are no real fences between the Kruger National Park and many of these lodges, and animals roam around. They don't know the difference between a national park and a private game lodge. And there are some differences which I'll touch on in a sec. So this is the lodge where you're going to be staying. You may get to eat outdoors. This is a dry river bed. At that time of the year, it should still be pretty dry because you're just coming out of the dry season. Hopefully you'll get to have some dinners outdoors in the boma, or the semi-enclosed boma. A boma is an enclosure, a reed enclosure. Some other meals indoors, and beautiful, newly renovated accommodations at Kapama River Lodge for your 3-night stay. Check that out. And maybe you're going to have some free time, which you will. There's a spa available. That's at additional cost. And after your spa, you can go and sit at the pool, and hopefully you will actually get to see some animals wandering around. I was fortunate to have that experience myself at Kapama and got to see some antelope and elephants in this area. So when you talk about a typical day on safari, what does that mean? So no lying in when you are on safari, usually an early wake-up call. It could be anywhere depending on the season. September, October could be 5:30-ish, or 6 even. And wake-up call, we're going to have some tea, coffee, and you see the word rusks here. Rusk is just a hard biscuit in South Africa that you dunk into your coffee, and then you depart and go off on safari. You go for a couple of hours, you come back, and you have breakfast, and you chill out at the lodge. You can go to the pool. You can have a spa activity if you wish to do so. And then lunch, you can ask your game ranger to take you on a safari walk. Later in the afternoon, we'll have some tea and depart on an afternoon game drive. And that continues into the evening. You return to your lodge after a couple of hours for dinner. So this is what the safari experience is like at a private game lodge. So why do I keep saying private game lodge in a national park? Well, in a national park, you have to stick to the roads. You have to be inside the park at a certain time and be out by a certain time. At a private game lodge, you have open vehicles, you have a game ranger, you have a tracker. And mostly in the national parks, you have an enclosed vehicle or semi-enclosed vehicles. And here at the private game now, because it's their own territory, they can traverse the land and track the animals. So this gentleman here, he tracks the animal, and we can follow them and go and check them out. So off you go on your beautiful safari experience. So morning and afternoon experiences during the course of your stay. And this is just to give you a sense of what it is that you may get to experience. So sometimes you may look at this and think, my goodness, we really get up close to the animals, and you do. And it's quite safe to do so. And the reason for that is that animals have become acquainted with the sound of a vehicle and the shape. They don't know what it is. They just know it's a shape. That shape and that sound has never threatened them. So they are comfortable to be in close proximity to the vehicles. So hopefully you'll get to see buffalo, rhino, elephant, lion, leopard, antelope. There's a variety of bird species. Buffalo, here's a shot of the buffalo, not my favorite. I always look at the buffalo and I see these horns and that piece in the front. It reminds me of an angry English judge wearing a wig. Hippo, that's a dung beetle doing its thing, and the tracker will actually spot that on the ground as we are driving around. They are so good at what they do. But here's the kicker as well. At a private game lodge, you can do a night safari. So when you go out in the afternoon, around 3:30, 4 o'clock, you will continue into the night. We usually stop, not usually, always stop at sunset. We get off the vehicle, we'll have a sundowner, and then go on your safari when the safari is done by spotlight to attract nocturnal animals. They don't disturb the other animals, but they're on the lookout for nocturnal animals. And this is also the time to get to see leopard, because this is when they come out in the early evening to do their hunting. So it is really a unique experience, private game lodge in itself, having a game ranger, having a tracker, and then doing your game viewing in an open vehicle. So 3 nights on safari, and we're going to go off to the city of Johannesburg. Quick and easy. It's only a 1-hour flight to get from the safari area over here down to Johannesburg. Johannesburg, we get to spend 2 nights at the lovely Marriott Balalaika Hotel. This hotel, in fact, all the hotels you're staying in have been recently refurbished, including the Balalaika, where you'll be spending 2 nights. Beautiful, comfortable, 4-star property located in the suburb of Sandton. So what are we going to do in Johannesburg? We're going to take you on some sightseeing, and that's going to include Soweto. Soweto is a township that was established during the apartheid years to separate people of color, and in this instance, it was people of black people who were located in Soweto. And Soweto actually stands for southwest of the city of Johannesburg, southwest of Johannesburg. And of course, the people of Soweto played a huge role in bringing about the democratic changes that happened in 1994. So also, you're going to learn a little bit about and see the homes of Mandela and Bishop Desmond Tutu. And who would have known that these 2 gentlemen, they lived within a couple of blocks of each other, would end up being Nobel Peace Prize winners. I think that's a rarity. And of course, you're going to learn about their part in bringing about the change in South Africa. Excuse me. We will make a couple of stops along the way. One includes the Hector Peterson Memorial. And the Hector Peterson was a young lad of 12 years old that was shot and killed by the police during the 1976 uprisings that happened in this area. So this memorial is a depiction of that particular time, as well as all people that were involved in that at that particular time. But we're also going to include a visit to the Apartheid Museum. This in history really dates back to just before 1948, when the then National Party came to power and introduced all the policies of apartheid and segregation. So they really depict this through photos, through artifacts as you make your way through the museum and learn about the history, and also not only about the apartheid that happened, but the changes that were brought about in 1994. So 2 nights in the city of Johannesburg, and then we're going to go off to Victoria Falls. Again, short distance, about a 2-hour, just under 2-hour flight from the city of Johannesburg, as you can see on the map. I'm going to cross over into Zimbabwe. We're going to spend 2 nights in Zimbabwe. Do remember, $75 needed for your visa on arrival. 2 nights at the beautiful Ilala Lodge. And guess what? Ilala Lodge also recently refurbished a beautiful property. We use that very often, particularly with many of the groups that travel with us, located very close to the Victoria Falls itself. 2 nights, and also the following has been included. Included here is a visit to the Victoria Falls, so you will go off with a guide who will tell you all about the falls, which is known as the smoke that thunders. Maybe not as full at that time of the year, but you'll certainly get to see it in this kind of form. And then also, we've included an evening sundowner cruise on the Zambezi River. So the Zambezi River, which separates Zimbabwe and Zambia. And we're going to take you out, and hopefully you'll get to see and enjoy the activities of the hippos as you enjoy some canapes. So it's going to be 2 nights in Victoria Falls, and our last night is going to be a celebration. We're going to go off to have a Boma dinner. And here you're not only going to eat, but you're going to be entertained. You're going to enjoy a variety of foods from Africa, not necessarily Southern Africa or Zimbabwe specific or South Africa specific, but really going to get a taste of all kinds of foods and African foods. There'll be some entertainment, there'll be some dancing, there'll be some drumming, and it's a great way to end your visit to Southern Africa, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. We then fly you back to Johannesburg after 2 nights, and then whatever airline is selected, you fly back to Canada, and I can tell you that they are awaiting your arrival. I thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you. I do believe I'm on time, Francis, 40 minutes, or just on.
That was beautiful.
40 minutes. And thank you again. And I do hope you all sign up. And Roshan, also, if you've got anything to add, please. Thank you.
Awesome.
That was beautiful, Philip.
Yeah, it was. And what I'm going to share with you now is the website where you can take a look. It's stewarttravelgroup.ca. I'm just going to put this in the chat /2024-Africa. And when you get to the page, you'll be able to see all of the highlights that Philip has gone through, a detailed itinerary of every day as he's described to us. And then the pricing, which is probably what many people are curious about. So the pricing for the land tour is 9,899 Canadian dollars per person, double occupancy. We do have some single occupancy space available, and I know we do have a few solo travelers who are interested in joining us, and I'm really excited about that. In addition, we have the flights. So the intracontinental flights, so the flights from Cape Town to the area where we'll be doing the safari, from there to Johannesburg, up to Victoria Falls and back. We're estimating at about, this was last fall, about $1,680. It might have changed a little bit since then. And so to book your spots, it's a very small group. It's 10 to 20 people. And I know Ian and Anne are on the line. They're joining us, and a few others, really excited by that. So the deposit for this trip is $1,650 Canadian per person. And then we will do final payments on the 15th of June. So all of the things that are included are listed. Philip's done an amazing job describing it, but breakfast every day. We've got 6 lunches and dinner, 6 dinners. So that's great. Otherwise, you have opportunity to go and eat locally, and our guide will be able to help us with recommendations of where you can go.
And we can...
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
Francis, don't mean to interrupt. And we can certainly provide some recommendations for restaurants as well.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'd really like to be able to have a little bit of both, where you can go off and explore and where you can have some group meals. So we've really tried to make it a combination so that we can do both. All of the entrance fees that, and the cruise and all of those things are included, the wine tasting. porterage and your bottled water, and our guide, ranger, and spotter. So international airfare is not included, your Zimbabwe visa is not included, and any gratuities, and we'll talk about that on the way. We also really recommend travel insurance that includes trip cancellation, trip interruption, emergency medical at a minimum, and we can talk to you about what the options are for those. So this is being hosted by me with shorter hair, and Calvin, my partner. That's from when we were in, where is that? Somewhere in Europe. And maybe in Bratislava, maybe in Passau, maybe, I think. Anyway, so we have been hosting tours. This will be our third or fourth, and we're really excited. I've done a few more with Travis and Paula. I'm really excited to host this. This trip is one that I was saying right at the beginning is one that I have been so excited for so long. And I'm really quite excited to share this with all of you. So we're going to open it to questions. For those of you who are, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. For those of you who are on the Google Meet, you can either put up your hand. There's a little hand, raise hand emoji in the bottom middle of your screen, and you can ask your question, or you can just type your question into the chat. And for those of you that are watching on Facebook, I can see the comments. So if you have questions, you can put them in the comments there, and I will ask them to Phillip. So we'll give everyone a second, but Phillip, what do you think we should all be most excited? What would the highlight of this?
Oh, that's not a fair question. What you need to be most excited about? Gosh, everything. But I will tell you this: the safari experience is really something unique.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're out there in that open vehicle, and sometimes they just stop and they make you listen. And you listen to the sounds of the birds, or in the distance you can hear some animals, or the trumpeting of the elephants, or a roar of a lion. It's beautiful. It's breathtaking.
Yeah.
That's a favorite for me. So, I'm fortunate that I go back to South Africa and I still have family there. I always try and include a safari experience.
That's amazing. So if I'm so far not seeing any questions, I'm just going to give it another minute. Roshan, what do you think we should be most excited about? You knew I was going to ask you that. You're going to have to unmute yourself before we.
Well, everything is different. I love this itinerary because it gives you a variety of experiences from the city. Your safari, some itineraries is all safari, and basically it's animal in, animal out. But this safari, this specific one is really like, it's a highlight, it's a bucket list. The Victoria Falls. I always say Victoria Falls, especially Zimbabwe, it gives you the virgin experience. Like Niagara Falls is all modernized, but Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, it's very unique. It's like the original experience. So it's definitely a beautiful itinerary.
That's amazing. Well, so far we have no questions, so we're going to not force the questions, but if you do have questions, you can reach out to me. I'll just put my email address in the chat. And for those of you who are on Facebook, it's Frances with an E at stewarttravelgroup.ca. You can message us directly on Facebook, and we would love to have you. So a big thank you, big thank you, Phillip and Roshan, for helping me put this together, and for all you've taught me about this part of the world. I can't wait to see it for myself. And I am really excited. If I was, I just can't wait to go. So, and I know Kelvin is the same. So if anyone has questions, I'd love to have you reach out. And thank you so much for giving our time and for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you.